Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to make my contribution to the Personal Income Tax Amendment Act 2009. Madam Speaker, let me first express my disappointment on the fact that this bill did not even appear on the order paper. And obviously, the bill itself is extremely vacuous. It doesn't even have an explanatory note. And I really think, Madam Speaker, that this is extremely bad work, poor work, very shabby work coming out of the Ministry of Legal Affairs and certainly from the Minister of Finance. One would have expected that there would have been an explanatory memorandum, and that too, even in the mover's presentation, that he would have indicated to this Honourable House the type of savings the adjustment in these bands would have created for taxpayers in this country. So I just want to flag that as a disappointment. Let me also say to you, Madam Speaker, that the Antigua Labour Party is philosophically opposed to personal income tax. As you're aware, the Antigua Labour Party ran this country for 28 years without personal income tax, and we did so successfully. In fact, it is true that towards the end of our last term in office that we had certain financial constraints which were due to the fact that the rate of taxation to GDP did not quite keep pace with the expansion of the economy. And obviously at that time, the rhetoric in the society was such that the Antigua Labour Party was wasting public resources, and I felt that the members so concerned, my colleagues then, were gun-shy to increase taxes. The UPP came on board in 2004, and rightfully so, increased taxes. However, our issue with the UPP at that time was that they had increased the level of taxation by too much, too soon. But we accept that indeed, that under the Antigua Labour Party, this country was undertaxed. In fact, when we were in government, we were only taxing about 16% of GDP. And evidently, that was too low. So as a result, that obviously created significant pressures on the government meeting all of its obligations. Now, Madam Speaker, in 2004, when the personal income tax was reintroduced, it was actually reintroduced as a stabilization fund. And, Madam Speaker, we were told in this Honourable House that it was a temporary measure designed to stabilize government's financing. Now today, several years later, Madam Speaker, this initiative is still on the books. You'd also recall too that when the ABST was passed, that it was indicated that subsequent to the passage of the ABST, that the stabilization fund, or for that matter the personal income tax, would have been repealed. Now, we are aware that the ABST yielded an additional $100 million in taxes, which means, Madam Speaker, there's absolutely no reason for the personal income tax to remain on the books. Now, the personal income tax is not being utilized to fund development. During the last budget debate, Madam Speaker, I examined 7 items of expenditure, namely vehicle expenses, miscellaneous expenses, travel, consultancy fees, subscriptions and contributions, investigative fees, and food and beverage. Those 7 items, Madam Speaker, were budgeted this year, 2009, to be in the region of $85 million. The budgeted amounts for those 7 items of expenditure for 2009, Madam Speaker, is $85 million. Now, Madam Speaker, in 2004, under the UPP, those 7 items of expenditure were actually budgeted for under $15 million. The same 7 items. So what they have done, Madam Speaker, is that they have actually ballooned expenditure. And whereas the UPP government was successful in taxing the people of this country, in increasing revenues by an additional $400 million, by virtually doubling taxation from $420 million to in excess of $800 million, they have been dismal failures, Madam Speaker, especially the Honourable Member for Rural East, in controlling expenditure. Even the IMF, in its Article 4 consultation, which was done, I believe, about July, August of last year, was actually very critical of the UPP government in their failure to exercise constraint on expenditure. Now, there is some deception, Madam Speaker, in the tweaking of these bans, and I'll explain why. It is obvious that we are now in an election year, and what the UPP government is seeking to do is to appeal to the electorate, especially those who pay the personal income tax, namely the middle-class elements in this country, that they care about them and that they're trying to, as they would put it, ease the squeeze. But if that was the case, Madam Speaker, one would have expected a substantial reduction in those bans. I see from the estimates of 2009 that the budgeted amount for personal income tax is 55 million. Now, in 2007, Madam Speaker, the actual, that is the amounts that the personal income tax yielded, was $50 million. It means, therefore, Madam Speaker, that the taxes are increasing by about $5 million a year. That is, the personal income tax is increasing by about $5 million a year, because it moved from 50 in 2007 to 55 in 2008, and is budgeted in 2009 to remain at 55. So, in the absence of any analysis from the Honourable Member from Rural East, Madam Speaker, it suggests to me that the savings, if there are any at all, would be a maximum of $5 million. Now, Madam Speaker, we are of the view that this particular tax should be eliminated in its entirety, especially considering that the funds are being utilized to fund government excesses, wasteful expenditure. Madam Speaker, today, on behalf of the Antigua-Labour Party, I will give the people of this country a commitment that upon the Antigua-Labour Party winning the next general elections, we will eliminate the personal income tax in its entirety. By so doing, Madam Speaker, we will put $50 million back into the pockets of the ordinary citizens of this country. And that will be part of our economic stimulus package in order to stimulate this country's economy in light of the global financial crisis that is impacting on all countries. Now, Madam Speaker, we will eliminate the tax, but at the same time, we will not introduce any new taxes, because there will be no need to introduce any new taxes. What we will do, Madam Speaker, is that we will ensure that we control wasteful expenditure. The $85 million, Madam Speaker, that is budgeted to cover vehicle expenses, miscellaneous expenses, travel, consultancy fees, subscriptions and contributions, investigative fees, food and beverage, we will reduce those, Madam Speaker, down to $30 million, thereby creating a cost saving of about $55 million. Now, $30 million, Madam Speaker, is still twice the amount these expenditures were back in 2004. Because, as I said earlier, they were initially at $15 million when the UPP came on board in 2004. Today, those are projected to reach $85 million. So, for instance, Madam Speaker, whereas the UPP government spent last year $8 million in investigative fees, the Antigua-Labour Party will spend zilch, zero. Because at the end of the day, we will not utilize the scarce tax dollars of this country to go on a witch hunt to pursue members on the other side. We will allow the justice system in this country to work. And we know, Madam Speaker, that many of them on the other side are in contravention of the Prevention of Corruption Act, as well as the Integrity in Public Life Act. And we'll allow the justice system to deal with them. I've made this point before. A head of state, fortunately or unfortunately, went to prison previously in this country without the then government spending millions upon millions of dollars hounding him to put him in jail. And I'm saying here, Madam Speaker, that when we win the next general elections, we will not spend $30, $40 million pursuing anybody on the other side. We'll allow the justice system to to deal with them for their transgressions. Now, Madam Speaker, that's $8 million. And you recognize that Comrade Asset Michael just won his case.